The Nexus Combat Simulation had been running for 3 standard cycles without a single technical glitch, which was remarkable considering it was simultaneously hosting the consciousness of 47 different species, each with their own delightfully incompatible neural architectures. The virtual arena floated in perfect mathematical space, its crystalline walls reflecting not light but pure information, a testament to engineering that had taken the Quillian collective 600 years to perfect, which made the sudden appearance of error messages in 17 different languages all the more embarrassing. "What do you mean, late registration?" Chief Administrator HFY's mandibles clicked in rapid succession, a sure sign of impending bureaucratic meltdown. The tournament sealed its participant roster 47 rotations ago. The holographic display flickered, showing a transmission request from a small blue planet that most databases still listed under recently discovered backwaters. The automated systems, bless their literal hearts, had already begun the intake process. "Sir," his assistant ventured, her tentacles nervously rearranging themselves, "the human representative claims they're here for the combat simulation. Their species was apparently overlooked during initial invitations." HFY's secondary eyes swiveled to focus on the data stream. "Overlooked? We sent invitations to every sentient species in the Galactic registry. How does one simply overlook?" He paused, reviewing the files. "Oh, they weren't classified as a military species. Should we redirect them to the Cultural Exchange Program? Or perhaps the Primitive Technology Showcase?" No. HFY's tentacles drummed against his workstation. "The rules are quite clear. Any species that formally requests participation and meets baseline sentience requirements must be accommodated. Legal precedent from the Mollusk Rebellion of 2847. In the competitor staging area, news of the late arrival had already begun spreading through the usual channels of gossip and scorn. The Zephyrian war dancer, whose species had perfected the art of ceremonial combat over millennia, offered a sound that translated roughly as derisive laughter. "Humans," she announced to her cluster of admirers. "I researched them after hearing the rumors. They fight with projectile weapons and explosives. Projectile weapons, as if warfare were simply about who could throw rocks the farthest." The Corvan siege master, whose exoskeleton bore the scars of 40 successful planetary conquests, rumbled his agreement. "My intelligence reports suggest they've only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their military history spans mere millennia, not eras. What could they possibly contribute to a simulation designed to test the galaxy's apex warriors?" "Entertainment value," suggested a voice from the Draconis delegation. "I've heard they have amusing customs around their combat rituals. Something about honor? The concept doesn't translate well." The conversation might have continued indefinitely. Aliens did love their philosophical debates about the nature of war, but was interrupted by the arrival of the human representative herself. She was, by most galactic standards, disappointingly unremarkable. Average height for her species, with the typical binocular vision and bilateral symmetry that marked so many of the newer civilizations. No visible combat modifications, no ceremonial scarring, no impressive display of natural weaponry. She wore what appeared to be standard issue clothing of her species, some kind of practical fabric arrangement that suggested function over intimidation. "Sorry I'm late," she said, addressing the room at large. "Traffic was murder getting through the Centauri check." The Zetharian's head frills quivered with barely contained amusement. "Traffic? You're here to compete in the Nexus Combat Simulation, not attend a social gathering." "Right, the simulation." The human consulted a small device in her palm. "Combat tournament, winner-take-all, galactic resource allocation for the next decade. Got it. Where do I register? You registered 3 cycles ago, the Corvan pointed out, not unkindly. This is not a casual competition. We have spent rotations preparing, studying our opponents, analyzing the simulation's previous iterations. The current tournament features the greatest warriors from 47 civilizations. 48 now, I guess. The human shrugged. Look, I know I'm behind schedule, but work's been crazy lately. Had to finish a project before I could take time off. The implications of this statement rippled through the assembled competitors like a particularly virulent meme. She had taken time off from work to participate in the most prestigious military competition in galactic history. The Draconi's representative actually snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve. "What manner of work," he inquired with the careful politeness reserved for the clearly deranged, "could possibly take precedence over representing your species in the Nexus?" "Oh, you know, engineering stuff. We were running behind on a terraforming project, and my team needed me to troubleshoot some atmospheric processor issues before the deadline." She paused, seeming to notice their expressions for the first time. Is that weird? I mean, I know this is important, but people are living on those worlds. Priorities, right? The silence that followed this revelation was broken only by the gentle hum of the simulation's processors and the distant sound of Administrator Vexay's mandibles clicking at what could only be described as panic frequency. "Your species sends a single representative," the Zephyrian said slowly, "who treats this competition as a recreational activity." "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of insulting." The human's tone remained conversational, almost cheerful. "But honestly, someone had to come, and I was the only one available on short notice. Everyone else was either working or had family obligations." "Available," the Corvan repeated, his translator struggling with the concept. "Yeah, I mean, it's not like anyone expects me to win or anything. The briefing materials made it pretty clear that you're all serious professional warriors with centuries of experience. I'm just here to make sure Earth gets represented. Diplomatic courtesy and all that." She looked around the room, taking in the assembled champions with the same mild interest one might show when examining a particularly elaborate garden display. "So," she continued, "where exactly do I pick up my simulation interface? And please tell me there's a tutorial mode, because I'm definitely going to need the practice." The Draconis representative exchanged glances with his nearest competitor, an expression that roughly translated to, "This is either going to be hilariously tragic or tragically hilarious." Administrator Vexay's voice crackled through the staging area's communication system. "Attention competitors, due to unusual circumstances, we will be extending the preparation period by 1 standard rotation to accommodate our final participant. Please report to your assigned simulation pods in 6 cycles for preliminary calibration." As the aliens dispersed to their respective preparation areas, most shaking their heads or making whatever gestures their species used to express bewilderment, the human remained behind, still studying her small device. "Excuse me," she called after the departing Corvan. "Quick question about the rules. It says here that we're fighting historical recreations of our species' greatest warriors. Does that mean we're supposed to roleplay as specific individuals, or are we just using their general fighting styles?" The Corvan paused at the threshold, his massive frame silhouetted against the corridor lighting. "We become them," he said simply. "The simulation downloads their memories, their skills, their tactical knowledge. We temporarily become the greatest champions our species has ever produced." "Ah." The human nodded thoughtfully. "That's actually pretty cool. So, who did Earth submit as their champion template?" "Benchen," the Corvan admitted. is information I do not possess. Such details are kept confidential until the competition begins. After he left, the human stood alone in the staging area, surrounded by the soft glow of alien technology and the quiet hum of systems she couldn't begin to understand. She looked up at the nearest camera node. "Well," she said to no one in particular, "this should be interesting." The pre-tournament media circus had achieved that special kind of chaos that only occurred when 48 different species tried to conduct interviews using translation matrices that weren't quite up to the task. Somewhere in the cacophony, a Vorthan journalist was attempting to explain the concept of trash talk to a species that communicated primarily through bioluminescent displays. "So you deliberately insult your opponent's ancestry before combat." The crystalline being's light patterns flickered in what might have been confusion or disgust. "It's psychological warfare," the Vorthan insisted. "You undermine their confidence, make them angry, disrupt their focus." "But why would anger be disruptive? Among my people, rage enhances combat performance by 37%. "Different species, different psychology," came a new voice. The human had somehow acquired a beverage that steamed in the station's atmosphere. Nobody wanted to ask what she was actually drinking. "Though I have to say, watching you all debate military theory is kind of fascinating." The hegemony's champion, a creature that resembled what would happen if someone crossed a mantis with a philosophy professor, turned his compound eyes toward her. "Fascinating how, exactly?" "Well, you're all approaching this from your own cultural frameworks. The Zifferins keep talking about honor duels. The Corvans are obsessing over siege tactics. The Draconi folks won't shut up about territorial dominance." She took another sip of her mystery beverage. "But none of you seem curious about what the other species actually bring to the table." "Because we already know," the hegemony champion replied, with the patience of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a child. "We've studied each other's military histories for generations. Your species, however, presents an interesting puzzle. Your military development follows no recognizable pattern. Most species show clear evolutionary progression, ritual combat to organized warfare to technological superiority. But humans," he gestured with one serrated appendage, "you simultaneously developed the most sophisticated diplomatic institutions in your galactic sector and the most efficient methods of planetary annihilation. It's contradictory." A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the promise of finally getting some insight into the mysterious late arrivals from the backwater system. "I mean," the human said, "that's not really contradictory, that's just practical. You need both carrot and stick for effective negotiation." "But your historical records," pressed a voice from the collective swarm mind, "show continuous warfare spanning your entire recorded civilization. How do you reconcile this with your claim to diplomacy?" "Who said anything about reconciling? We fight wars and we make peace, sometimes simultaneously. Doesn't everyone?" The silence that greeted this observation was profound enough that even the translation matrices seemed to pause in confusion. "Let me guess," the human continued, apparently oblivious to the growing crowd of bemused aliens. "Most of your species had one big evolutionary moment where you either became peaceful or became warriors and then just stayed that way?" "Evolution tends towards specialization," the hegemony champion said carefully. "That explains a lot, actually." She gestured around the room. "Look at this tournament setup. You've got the honorable duelists, the tactical commanders, the berserker types, the technological superiority folks. Everyone's got their niche. And humans? We're generalists, I guess. Jacks of all trades, masters of none." She paused, seeming to consider this, though that saying never made much sense to me. If you're facing 47 different types of specialists, being a generalist seems like a pretty good strategy. Before anyone could respond to this unsettling observation, the announcement system crackled to life, with Administrator Vexai's increasingly frazzled voice. Attention competitors, please report to Interview Bay 7 for mandatory pre-competition psychological evaluation and media statements. The crowd began to disperse, but not before the human called out one final question that would haunt the upcoming competition. Hey, just out of curiosity, has anyone actually won this tournament before by not fighting? The first elimination round opened with a spectacle that would have impressed even the most jaded military historians. The Nexus simulation had conjured a perfect replica of the ancient Corvan fortress world of Drakmor, complete with gravitational anomalies and acid rain. Watching the assembled champions navigate this hellscape while attempting to eliminate each other was like witnessing illusion in fast forward. The Zephyrian war dancer moved like liquid lightning, her ceremonial blades carving paths through space that defied several laws of physics. The hegemony's champion had somehow turned his philosophical nature into a tactical advantage, predicting opponents' moves by analyzing their psychological profiles in real time. Even the peaceful Mollusk Confederation's representative, who everyone had written off as cannon fodder, demonstrated an alarming proficiency with biological warfare. And then there was the human. What exactly is she doing? The chief commentator's confusion was shared by approximately 4 billion viewers across the galaxy. It appears, his co-commentator replied with the careful tone of someone trying to make sense of chaos, that she's having conversations? Indeed, the human seemed to be treating the elimination round less like a battle royale and more like a networking event. She'd approach each opponent, exchange what appeared to be pleasantries, and then they would eliminate themselves. Not through any visible coercion or combat technique, but apparently through voluntary withdrawal. This is unprecedented, the chief commentator continued. Competitors are simply leaving the simulation after speaking with the human representative. In the observation deck, Administrator Vexai was experiencing what his species classified as a bureaucratic seizure. Someone get me a direct feed to those conversations. I need to know what she's saying to them. The audio enhancement revealed something even more disturbing than expected. Really impressive technique with the plasma convergence, the human was saying to a Thermian fire warrior. Though I have to ask, doesn't channeling that much thermal energy through your carapace cause long-term cellular damage? The Thermian paused mid-attack. Well, yes, most of my species die young from combat thermal poisoning, but glory in battle is worth... Oh, definitely. I'm not questioning the cultural significance. It's just from an engineering perspective, have you considered heat redistribution matrices? My team developed some really elegant solutions for thermal management in hostile environments, much more efficient than direct absorption. Value. De-redistribution. Sure. Here, let me show you the basic principles. The audio cut out as the Thermian voluntarily exited the simulation, apparently to discuss thermal engineering rather than continue fighting. She's talking them out of competing, Vexai whispered, his mandibles frozen in horror. She's treating a military competition like a technical conference. Round after round, the pattern continued. The human would engage each opponent in conversation, identify some aspect of their combat technique or cultural practice that intersected with her professional expertise, and somehow convince them that discussing engineering solutions was more interesting than winning the tournament. By the semi-final round, only 4 competitors remained. The legendary Fietmore the Ravager, a creature whose species had conquered 17 star systems through pure violence. The Draconis territorial champion, the Vorthan psychological warfare specialist, and the human. The simulation had shifted to mirror the crystalline caves of Zerion Prime, where acoustics could kill and light itself became a weapon. It was Thekmor's preferred environment, a place where his species' natural advantages would be overwhelming. "Finally," growled Thekmor, his translated voice carrying undertones that made nearby recording equipment malfunction. "A worthy opponent who cannot simply talk her way to victory." The humans studied the cave system with professional interest. "Actually, this is really well designed. The resonance frequency calculations alone must have taken forever to calibrate. Did the simulation architects account for material density variations in the crystal matrices?" "What?" Thekmor's confusion was palpable. "The acoustics. I'm just wondering about the technical implementation. In my experience, getting realistic sound propagation through crystalline structures requires some pretty sophisticated modeling." For the first time in recorded history, Thekmor the Ravager, destroyer of worlds, consumer of civilizations, found himself discussing engineering specifications rather than engaging in combat. The conversation lasted 14 minutes. At its conclusion, he too voluntarily exited the simulation. "I need," he announced to the stunned observers, "to speak with my species architects about improved fortress design," which left only the human and the Draconis champion in the final round. "This is impossible," breathed the chief commentator. "She's eliminated 36 opponents without throwing a single punch." In the preparation area, the human was reviewing her notes when the Draconis representative approached. "I will not be swayed by technical discussions," he declared. "My people are warriors, not engineers." "Oh, I know," the human replied cheerfully. "I read up on Draconis military history during the break. Really impressive territorial expansion patterns. Though I have to ask, have you ever considered the logistical challenges of maintaining supply lines across multiple star systems?" The Draconis champion paused. "Logistics? Well, yeah. I mean, conquering territory is one thing, but actually administering it efficiently? That's the real challenge." The final arena materialized as a perfect void. No gravity, no atmosphere, no environmental advantages for either species. Just two consciousness matins facing each other in mathematical space, with 4 billion viewers holding their collective breath. The Draconis champion had survived the logistics conversation, though barely. His species' administrative systems, it turned out, had some fascinating inefficiencies that the human found professionally intriguing. But now, stripped of distractions, he was determined to end this farce through pure combat superiority. "No more talking," he snarled, his form shifting into full battle configuration. Scales hardened into armor plating, claws extended into molecular edge weapons, neural pathways optimized for violence. "This ends now." The human floated opposite him, still wearing her unremarkable clothing, still carrying that same expression of mild professional interest. "You know, I've been wondering something this whole time." I said no more. Who did my species submit as their champion template? The question hung in the void like a challenge. In the observation deck, Administrator Vexai frantically accessed the sealed files he'd been trying to decode since her arrival. "The simulation downloads historical warriors," the Draconi champion said, his attack pattern shifting as confusion crept in. "You should already know. You are them." "Right, but here's the thing." The human's tone remained conversational, even as her opponent's form grew more threatening. "I never felt any download, no memory integration, no skill transfer, no tactical databases suddenly appearing in my head. I'm still just me." Vexai's mandibles clicked in rapid succession as the sealed files finally opened. "Oh! Oh no!" "What?" demanded his assistant. "The human template. Look at the classification." The file displayed a single designation that made everything suddenly terrifyingly clear. Civilian Engineer Specialist Classification. Problem Solver. "They didn't submit a warrior," Vexai whispered. "They submitted themselves." In the arena, the Draconis champion launched his attack, a devastating combination of energy projection and kinetic force that had never failed to destroy opponents in a single strike. The mathematics of the assault were perfect, the execution flawless. The human stepped sideways. Not dodged, not evaded with superhuman reflexes or advanced combat training, simply took one small step to the left, as if avoiding a puddle on the sidewalk. "That's what I thought," she said, watching the energy blast dissipate harmlessly into the void. "You're all operating under the same fundamental assumption." "What assumption?" The champion's voice carried the first hint of uncertainty. "This is a combat simulation." The arena froze. Not just the action. The entire mathematical framework supporting the simulation locked into stasis as the human's words propagated through the system's logic chords. "It's not, though. It's a problem-solving exercise disguised as a combat tournament. The real test isn't who can fight best. It's who can find the optimal solution with the available resources." She gestured to the void around them. No environmental hazards to exploit, no tactical advantages to leverage, no weapons beyond what you bring naturally. Strip away all the variables, and what's left? The Draconis champion's form began to flicker as the simulation struggled to process her logic. "Communication," she continued. "Resource allocation. Efficiency optimization. Engineering problems." The void shimmered, and suddenly they were no longer in an arena, but in what appeared to be a vast control room, with displays showing resource distribution across 48 star systems. "The winner gets to manage galactic resource allocation for a decade," the human said, settling into what looked like a command chair. Did anyone actually think they'd hand that responsibility to whoever could punch hardest? The Draconis champion stared at the displays, his combat configuration slowly reverting to normal form. But the warriors, the historical champions, the combat simulation screening process, they needed to know which species would send their best problem solvers versus which ones would send their best killers. The human was already reviewing allocation algorithms with the same enthusiasm she'd shown for engineering discussions. "The 47 species that sent warriors, they'll be managed by whoever wins. The one species that sent an engineer gets to do the managing." This was rigged from the beginning. Not rigged, just designed by people who understand the actual job requirements. She looked up from the displays with that same mild expression she'd worn throughout the tournament. "Though I have to admit, I was running late because I was trying to figure out why Earth got invited to a military competition when we're not classified as a warrior species. Took me until the semi-finals to realize we weren't invited to compete, we were invited to administer." The simulation ended with a soft chime, returning them to the staging area, where 47 bewildered alien champions stood facing one human engineer who was still trying to figure out how to optimize interstellar supply chains. Administrator Vexai's voice echoed through the chamber. "Ladies, gentlemen, and various other configurations of sentience, your new resource allocation administrator." The human looked around at the assembled aliens, most of whom were still processing what had just happened. "So," she said, "anyone want to discuss infrastructure development over lunch? Because I have some ideas about improving your trade route efficiency that I think you'll find really interesting." Somewhere in the distance, The sound of 47 different species simultaneously experiencing existential crisis created a harmony that the universe had never heard before. The tournament, it turned out, had been over before it began. The real question was never who would win, it was who would show up qualified for the actual job.